Hey there, Eli again, coming at you from OSA Coventry, here today with part 2 of our new planted Waterbox Peninsula aquarium. If you guys tuned in on Monday afternoon, you saw me ripping this tank apart, removing driftwood from it, catching fish out of it, in order to change this aquarium over to a planted tank. Monday was a busy day for me, catching a lot of fish out of this tank, had to remove the ghost knife, the severums, the waru, pictus cats, anything that I thought might be uprooting or eating plants, or messing with any of the community fish that we were planning on adding to this tank after adding plants. In addition to that, I removed a lot of the driftwood and changed some of the pieces around so that I had a little bit more open space for planting, had a little more room in order to stuff this tank full of stem plants, and I was able to add about probably 40 or 50 more pounds of this sand just to make sure I had an adequate place for these plants to root, just to make my job of planting this aquarium a little bit easier. As you see, I chose a bunch of different stem plants to plant this tank with, tried to go with a lot of different easier plants. There's hydrocotyle or pennywort, there's a couple types of bacopa, a couple types of Ludwigia, rotalas, and some crypts going on in this tank as well as a couple of red plants. There's a red type of Ludwigia, there's a piece of alternanthera going on in this tank. Overall, tried to keep this with some of the easier stem plants, just to provide us with a tank that's going to be easier in the long haul and is going to fill in pretty well for us as well. Tried to make sure to just cram this tank full of plants on day one to make sure that we don't run the risk of algae taking hold. This is one of the keys to making sure that your planted aquarium stays nice, clean, and green without the risk of algae growth, is just making sure you cram the tank on day one with as many plants as you can get away with. So I tried to make sure that this tank was decently full, that I didn't leave too much open space so that these plants are able to compete in the long run with any algae that might start to grow. As far as it goes for equipment, we decided to go with this Dymax RX123 regulator. This is a dual stage CO2 regulator that has a built-in solenoid valve so that we can allow this tank to be on when we desire for it to be on just by use of a timer. So this tank comes on about 30 minutes after the lights go on in the morning. It shuts off about 30 minutes before the lights go out at night, so we don't run into CO2 buildup at nighttime and the associated pH swings that come with it. And in case this would be something that you guys are not familiar with, here's a quick little voice clip of Scott Crow telling you how to add one of these to a 20-pound CO2 cylinder.
Thank you, Eli. Firmly install the regulator to the CO2 cylinder. Gently fasten the regulator with a wrench if necessary. Do not over-tighten so you don't accidentally damage the O-ring. Connect the DC wire between the adapter and the solenoid valve. Make a drip loop at the wire to avoid water getting into any electrical components. Fill 2/3 of the bubble counter with water. Attach the bubble counter to the regulator. Turn on the cylinder valve. Plug the adapter to the power socket and turn on the power supply. Adjust the regulator to regulate the CO2 supply through checking the bubble counter. Finally, ensure CO2 is constantly flowing through the diffuser. Back to you, Eli.
Thanks, Scott. In addition to your regulator and your CO2 tank itself, you also need something to get the CO2 diffused into the water. I went with the largest atomizer that we carry right now from Dymax as well. Make sure we get an adequate diffusion of CO2 into the aquarium water. And I place this into the corner right below the outflow nozzles from the return pump to make sure that this CO2 is getting blown across the aquarium and gets a little more contact time with the aquarium water so that we get an adequate diffusion into the water column to make sure that this CO2 is not just being off-gas and wasted. In addition, this beautiful little piece of equipment to the left of me here is a drop checker, and this is a very important piece of equipment for a planted aquarium. This gives you a visual cue as to how much CO2 you're actually running in the aquarium, and this will offer a change in color to allow you to see how much CO2 is currently in the water column. Ideally, this should be a bright green color. Right now, it is a little bit on the blue side, and that's just because the CO2 tank just turned on, as it is the morning, and this just only had maybe 5 minutes or so to start running. But ideally, this should be a bright green color. If it turns yellow, that gives you an indication that there's too much CO2 in the aquarium, and you should dial it back. And if it turns more of a blue color, that indicates that you're not using enough CO2, and maybe you can turn it up just a hair to make sure that you're getting enough CO2 for the plants to use. And as for lighting, as I mentioned on Monday, this tank was already running 2 freshwater AI primes, but I did scare up a third that we could throw over the tank And hopefully this is a sufficient amount of lighting to make sure that we're getting a good amount of light to the bottom of this aquarium, as it is decently deep. And I think that should give us a sufficient light to grow all of these stem plants as well. So I already talked a little bit about plant stocking, but as for fish, I did change some of this stuff up. However, I'm going to add some more fish as well, in addition to what you're seeing already. What did stay from the previous tank was these beautiful silver angels and these serpe tetras. There's also a small group of bleeding heart tetras that I think make a decent addition to this tank as is. In addition, I added a small group of diamond tetras, which are one of my favorite underrated tetras for a community aquarium, that get to a decent size and add a really cool flash of silver and blue to the tank. Additionally, there are a small group of albino silvertip tetras as well, which just school very tightly. I think that schooling presence is a really beautiful thing in a planted tank, and I love the whites and oranges that these fish offer for the tank as well. For utilitarian fish, I also added a small group of Siamese algae eaters. These are hands down one of the most useful algae eating fish for a planted aquarium. These guys generally eat more filamentous or hair algae than they would, say, film algae, but they are a godsend when it comes to the topic of blackbeard algae, which is a nuisance that a lot of planted aquarium keepers will eventually run into down the road. And I wanted to make sure that I was starting off on the right foot in case blackbeard algae was to take hold. And these guys have already been munching at the driftwood and making sure that we're not running into these filamentous algae. And I feel like adding these this early on is definitely going to be important in making sure that we don't have these nuisance algae down the road. I do have plans of adding some additional fish as well, mostly some other schooling fish, but maybe some other utilitarian fish, bristlenose plecos and cory cats, to make sure that waste isn't building up on the bottom and that algae isn't taking roots on our rocks, on the leaves, and on the driftwood. And as for supplements for this aquarium as well, as of right now, I really just focus on root tabs. So these are the Dimax root supplements. These are a type of root tab that I placed basically anywhere that I added stem plants. I placed them about 3 to 4 inches apart from each other, just to make sure that the substrate is offering enough nutrients for these plants to grow off of. As the sand itself is not really a nutritious substrate, this should offer some supplementation to the substrate so these plants have adequate nutrients and trace elements to feed off of. We may as well start adding some liquid fertilizers into the mix just to make sure that we're getting adequate supplementation to the plants. In addition to this regular root tab, Dimax also has an iron supplement, which is another type of root tab, and I added these anywhere that we added those red stem plants, as iron is a very important supplement to making sure that these plants stay red. And as you saw in part 1 on Monday, you saw Stacy, Scott, and Justin unboxing all the new Dimax stuff, and you're getting to see me show some of it off in the tank as well. But let's go take a look at all the new things that we got in stock from Dimax for your planted tank needs. This here is our beautiful new plant wall here at OSA Coventry, showing off all the new Dimax aquarium products that we have to offer. So we have everything now from different types of supplements, root tabs, to scaping tools, lily pipes, either glass or stainless, to add to your aquarium canister filters. We also have all the CO2 diffuser products, whether you need a diffuser or regulator. We've got the diffusers over there, all sorts of different aquarium additives, some liquid fertilizers, your root tabs. In addition, we have a couple UV sterilizers. These are inline sterilizers that would be great to plumb into a canister filter to keep your water polished and super clear. Dimax also sent us some new different types of scaping substrates, in addition to the usual Fluval, the Aquasolum, and the Seachem substrates that we had to offer in the past. So if you guys are looking to get into a planted aquarium, feel free to check out any of our locations. We should be pretty decently stocked on all the new planted aquarium products. Ask us any questions you might have about running CO2 or about starting a planted aquarium. Hopefully we have some nice new stuff to offer to get you guys started in the aquascaping side of the hobby. As always, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions in the comment section below. And as always, keep it fishy.